world is more connected than ever before. Information is literally at our fingertips 24/7. And while this has led to a wealth of knowledge and perspectives, it has opened the floodgates of misinformation, especially when it comes to nutrition. Take, for example, some of the most popular diet-related myths that just continue to stick around, like lemon water detoxing our bodies when our livers and kidneys do the actual detoxing. And while lemon water can be refreshing, it's not a solution to detox. Or another myth that carbs are the enemy and should be avoided, when in reality, carbohydrates are an important source of energy for our bodies. And black or white, kind of all or nothing nutrition recommendations or myths really miss out on the nuance of what is actually the truth. Or the other myth that the more supplements, the more vitamins that you take, the better, when in reality, a lot of times that can lead to damage down the line. So those are just a few small examples, but so many myths are just presented as fact, as truth, and it leads to a lot of confusion and even worse, harm. In this day and age, with all of this information at our fingertips, it is essential, in my opinion, to be discerning, to think critically, and to turn to reliable sources on the journey of health and wellness. So with all of that said, hi folks, welcome to my channel, or welcome back. My name is Kat. I'm a licensed registered dietitian nutritionist, and on this channel, we like to talk about weight inclusive and weight neutral focused approaches to health, as well as diving into scammy and, in my opinion, unethical nutrition related businesses, products, mostly nutrition related MLMs, and other fear mongering nutrition related claims. Today, I wanted to talk about the age of information overload, specifically when it comes to nutrition and misinformation from there. Now, at this time, anyone can publish information, anyone can be an influencer, and while that can be great and for so many different reasons, it is so important to be that much more discerning. The world is saturated with nutrition information right now, and there is wisdom to knowing how to sift through it, and it can be really challenging. And so my goal for this video is to provide a little bit of, common ground on how confusing and how frustrating that can be, unpacking that a little bit, and then giving you some tips or advice on how to approach kind of those nutrition myths, or if you don't know that they're myths, kind of nutrition facts, and kind of approach them in a way that might help you see if they are myth or if they have some kind of information, like helpful information, but buried underneath a whole lot of diet culture, misinformation, unhelpful, and not very beneficial advice. So I want to talk about some of the potential outcomes of nutrition misinformation, the potential consequences of it, I should say, of the application of that misinformation, and a lot of the manipulation tactics that influencers, nutrition and health related ones often use, and ultimately some ways how to decipher between those claims. So if all of that sounds good to you, if you want to dive into that with me, let's go. All right, so first off, let's address some very potentially real health outcomes that can happen from nutrition misinformation. This is a huge reason why I first started talking about health claims and misinformation, nutrition related, on my channel, because I work with people one-on-one and I was seeing so many outcomes of misinformation on the people who I was working with. Now, there are so many potential outcomes that can be the result of nutrition misinformation. One of them is nutrient deficiencies, or the opposite, nutrient overload, or toxicity. For example, if somebody is taking a specific nutrient that they read online to help with the specific concern that they were concerned about, if they're over consuming that, we have seen in research in various different circumstances how that can impact negatively their kidney health and their liver health. There has even been ties of that to specific MLM products. This is one of the reasons why whenever I see a lot of people just adding a whole bunch of unnecessary supplements to their intake, and they might be getting an excessive amount of specific nutrients where it's just too much. Not only is your body not going to use that, but it has to work harder to get rid of that. That can lead to some of those potential issues, kidney related or liver related or elsewhere bodily related. A recent example that I was talking to another healthcare professional about was the fact that a lot of people the last couple of years have been taking zinc supplements in order to help with their immune system. And while that can be beneficial, right? If somebody is deficient in zinc, that can cause second and third order effects that might impact their body's ability to fight specific conditions. If there is excessive supplementation in something like zinc, that can actually cause some deficiencies in copper because of the uptake and the kind of how the body uses zinc. It can use the processing of it can be so overloaded processing that zinc that it then leads to a copper deficiency. And so, that's just a very recent example, but one that can be seen and that has been seen with the excessive consumption of something like zinc. And I don't want to, make somebody get scared of having that zinc. Zinc can be very helpful in certain circumstances, in certain amounts, but it's when there is this all or nothing kind of approach where I get a little bit concerned about the toxicity amount and the overall consumption of it. So in that example specifically, we have some potential outcomes of toxicity, overload, but then also deficiency on the other side. Another potential outcome is that the exacerbation of a specific health condition. So interactions between certain medications and certain supplements that can make a condition that much more challenging, potentially causing some issues down the line, or adverse effects. The interaction between some supplements and medications, or even some foods and medications, can make that plan of action for the medication. It can make that medication's efficacy or the ability to do its job, how it's working, it can change the outcome. Sometimes I'll see people have a lot of herbal supplements thinking that because it's natural that it's safe. Unfortunately, as awesome as it would be to have this kind of overall approach, or this overall kind of blanket of because it's natural, it's safe, unfortunately that's not how it really is. Some things that are very natural can be very unsafe and can interact with certain medications or certain conditions. Another consequence of nutrition misinformation that I see often is the kind of mental effects that specifically dieting has on people. Now, I am not a mental health professional at all. I will refer out as needed, but I can still see how dieting, how fad dieting, how different kind of nutrition plans can have an impact on someone's their mental health. Just constantly chasing that the perfect diet, or that next quick fix, or that next kind of cure, that can take a toll on someone's not only their physical health but also their mental health. Constantly chasing this kind of miracle diet or this miracle cure can potentially lead to some stress, health-related stress, health-related anxiety, and maybe feelings of inadequacy when those outcomes aren't achieved. It is one reason why I work so hard on really promoting the idea of having a healthy relationship with food and making sure that what we're doing is sustainable, because the worst thing that we can do is promote this kind of diet cycling, which also results typically in weight cycling that puts stress on the body, and that can do more harm than good in the long run. Another potential outcome of nutrition misinformation is physical harm. So consuming something that's maybe not meant for human consumption, like the trend of borax, taking that, consuming that for health purposes, that's an example. But just taking these non-food items, these non-food products, using those as a way to address health issues, that can lead to some potential physical harm. Another outcome is wasted time, resources, and wasted financial resources. We can't really get those back whenever we are spending time or spending money on ineffective programs and supplements, products. And even more so than the fact that those resources are lost, the time spent on those ineffective treatments can further delay evidence-based treatments and making things a little bit more challenging to treat in an evidence-based way down the line. And another potential harmful outcome from nutrition misinformation or health misinformation is the loss of trust of evidence-based practice, of health professionals who really have their best interests, your best interest at heart. Having someone repeatedly getting exposed to misinformation about health professionals, that can just erode someone's trust in seeking out the care that might really be beneficial and potentially necessary for them. And at that time, if somebody is experiencing some kind of challenging health issue, they're at a vulnerable place. And so having that kind of repeated misinformation can really do damage to someone's trust in evidence-based care. Now, given all these risks, it is so essential to be discerning when seeking out health information and prioritizing information from people who are licensed and have training and really do want to help, rather than those who are trying to put fear or like fear monger, try to scare someone into not following that specific recommendations in order to purchase a specific program or product or supplement. Usually there's a reason why someone is doing this kind of like fear mongering. So let's talk a little bit about some of the common ways of manipulation that is often seen in nutrition, kind of like gurus or nutrition influencers. Now, not all nutrition influencers are going to be promoting misinformation. There are a lot of well-meaning and well-educated nutrition influencers who are really promoting evidence-based information and really helping people. At the same time, though, there are many who are doing the complete opposite, going a completely different routes and adopting these kind of like really crafty ways of sowing deception or sowing just like deceptive marketing into people little by little and really causing this kind of fear about evidence-based care. There's a lot of deceptive manipulation tactics in order to grab attention, to gain followers, and to influence their thinking. Whether that desire is just for more followers, for lucrative brand deals, or the appeal of like going viral because it's a lot easier to grift. When you're in the health field, it's so much easier to grift than to actually present evidence-based information, and their audience trusts them for their honest guidance and their honest advice, and so it gets to be a really, really sad kind of situation overall. So let's talk about some of those tactics. One of those tactics is this kind of pseudo expertise or this authority illusion. Some influencers will portray themselves as a nutrition expert despite not having the credentials to back that up. Some might use like impressive language. They might even flash studies going on behind them. But when you actually look at the studies, maybe they're interpreting the information in the opposite way, or the study had like 5 people in them. A lot of people don't know the difference even between a registered dietitian and a nutritionist, and that's okay. I'm not faulting anybody at knowing the difference. There's a lot of misinformation even when it comes about that, or lack of knowledge around that. So a registered dietitian is someone who has an undergraduate or a master's degree in nutrition. They have supervised practice, they took the national board exam, and then they have continuing education requirements. And typically, like, once somebody is an RD, that's kind of like the starting, really, where you can go then and specialize in a specific area. For me, for example, I specialize in sports nutrition and digestive health, and with an umbrella over that of building a healthy relationship with food. And there are other places, so many different areas that an RD can really specialize in, but that is kind of like the background of an RD. The term nutritionist does not have a standard kind of background. Somebody who took a weekend course can technically call themselves a nutritionist in most places, but there are also some people who will call themselves nutritionists who have a lot of background and who have a lot of experience coaching and who have been very great. And so it can be really confusing with different terms and credentials or lack of credentials, and understanding what those credentials are. Sometimes people will just randomly put letters behind their name. Sometimes there are actual like board exam related letters that you can put behind your name, but some people just put random letters behind their name. So it can be really confusing. It's part of the reason why I'm talking about this and just trying to get information out there. Going back to some of the manipulation tactics that are sometimes used by nutrition influencers who aren't really promoting the most evidence-based information. Another example is anecdotal evidence, or their specific experience of using a product or going through a program. Now, personal experience, in my opinion, it is important, it is valid, but we can't base our experience, we can't use that to recommend something to someone else like across the board. It might work for someone else, but it also might not. And so part of the schooling behind a nutrition professional is knowing how to apply different information for different people and not leveraging those kind of emotionally driven stories or anecdotes. Like, that's not appropriate. And so if you're seeing a lot of anecdotal information, their own experience, and it's very emotionally driven, driven, that's a really good sign that it's probably a manipulation tactic with the goal of trying to sell something. Another manipulation tactic is having financial ties without disclosure. There are different viewpoints on this. I can understand various viewpoints. My thoughts, my viewpoints is as long as somebody is very upfront with the fact that what they're doing is either sponsored or they got free product or anything. Basically, if they're following the FTC guidelines, I'm okay with that because they're following those FTC guidelines by disclosing any kind of relationship that they have with a product to their followers, to their viewers. It's when people are constantly promoting a product without that clear disclosure that I have some concerns that it's a manipulation tactic. One of my recommendations would just be to be aware of nutrition influencers who are just constantly throwing out like specific products, who are talking like here and there. Like there are specific products that I absolutely love that I will recommend people, and some of them I have like affiliate codes with and other ones I don't, and that is okay. Like I will still talk about them equally, and some people might feel that that is an issue still, and that's okay. I fully respect that opinion. I think that as long as I fully disclose that is okay, but other people might not think, and that's okay. But this also is in alignment with like what we talk about on this channel a lot with specific MLM companies, how you'll have a distributor talk about this specific company and how all of their products are like the best overall, when that is not the case. And so when I see an influencer talking only about a specific company or like their line of products, that is, in my opinion, could be another manipulation tactic. A red flag nonetheless. Another manipulation tactic is this kind of us versus them narrative. This specifically can cause a lot of distrust in evidence-based guidelines and evidence-based practitioners. And they kind of have this kind of approach of like, we hold the secret, or what they don't want you to know. That kind of approach, that kind of messaging can garner a lot of followers, but it also spreads this kind of mistrust of evidence-based care and misinformation overall. Another tactic is cherry picking evidence, is kind of confirmation bias. So sharing only information that aligns with their beliefs and just ignoring any other information that contradicts it. And more specifically, information that contradicts it, especially from like more well put together studies. Like some studies are not going to be very great. Some of them are going to be great. And so just focusing maybe on one small study, or not even talking about one that is much larger. So some influencers will cite sources like out of context. Kind of mentioned this briefly before, but I have seen people take a study and pull out information that's actually contradictory to what the study was talking about. And studies can be hard to interpret. And so part of me wants to believe that maybe it was just a misunderstanding in the interpretation of it. But another side of me also thinks that sometimes people will use those knowing that it will like make their argument appear a little bit more strong, and then kind of manipulating what they're taking out of that study. Another manipulation tactic, in my opinion, is fear mongering. Just straight up fear mongering. Sometimes I think that using fear as a way to promote something or like move someone to a specific action can be helpful. For example, using a car seat or using a seatbelt. You can use the fear of what can happen if you're not using a car seat or a seatbelt in order to help people move along in adapting the use of a car seat or a seatbelt, right? Like I think using fear in that way is appropriate. Not everybody might think that, but I think that that is fine. So I'm not like fully against fear-based information, but amplifying these kind of potential health risks, like creating unwarranted fears around food intake or food groups, that is usually coupled alongside of promoting their solutions, their products. It's just unnecessary. And so anytime like scrolling on Instagram, or if someone sends me a TikTok of a health claim, fear mongering around health is one of my biggest annoyances, because it is just not necessary and it takes so much nuance out of the picture. And when we're talking about science, when we're talking about health, there is so much nuance that needs to be taken into consideration. And fear mongering, it's rooted in misinformation most of the time. And so if somebody is trying to scare you about a specific food or food product or like things like that, it's a red flag at least, and most of the time it's a manipulation tactic. Another manipulation tactic is this kind of bandwagon approach, suggesting that like because this specific trend is popular, since so many people are doing it, that it must be beneficial, that it must be the right thing to do. That's not always the case. And then another manipulation tactic, which we've seen in a lot of different MLM companies, but also non-MLM as well, is these kind of like supplements being promoted as a way to fix this kind of issue. Like this quick fix, this cure-all kind of thing. It's just so important for customers to use a lot of critical thinking when seeing claims, especially about health-related ones or nutrition-related claims. It's important. We do know a lot about nutrition and what makes the foundations of a healthy intake. It isn't about following the latest trend. It's about making informed choices that are going to be beneficial for our health and also sustainable. And recognizing that individualized nutrition is part of the picture. Everyone is unique, from our genetics to our lifestyle, from the environments in which we live and are primarily in. One specific health needs can look very different from another person's health needs, but we do have a foundational knowledge of what are the building blocks to supporting a nutrient dense kind of body. Now, it's also important to note that nutrition isn't like this fix-all thing. Some people like to say that nutrition is medicine, and while I can understand in some cases that it can definitely impact certain conditions, it is not like a pharmaceutical. And there are reasons that pharmaceuticals can still be very, very necessary to individuals and their conditions. Nutrition is not always going to prevent someone from a chronic condition. It can play a role in that, but there are so many other things that also can play a role in chronic conditions. And so many people can be this kind of like picture of health and kind of we think of as the epitome of health, and they can experience some chronic health issues. It's not just about what they're consuming. Like, food is just part of an intricate puzzle of someone's health. And sometimes nutrition influencers, nutrition gurus can kind of push this idea, this narrative that as long as we eat healthy that we won't get sick. That is not the case. As much as somebody would want that to be the case, like that is just not how it works, unfortunately. All right, so let's dive into some helpful tips or advice to help stay away from those kind of nutrition misinformation claims. Number one is to remain skeptical. But if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Take a step back and question it. Check the sources. If they're saying recent studies, like even an article from a newspaper, if it says a recent study, what is a study? Where was the study done? Who was the study done on? Who is funding the study? What is the story around the study? Like, looking at the actual information. Is there clear citations for that study to find that study in the first place? If it's coming from a source that is just kind of sensationalizing claims, which a lot of places do, red flags should be waving. All the red flags. Critical thinking is your friend. Analyze those claims, compare them to known facts, and don't hesitate to do some digging. If it is completely contradicting what we know that is supportive of a healthy intake, typically there's going to be more to the story, right? Like, for example, if you see a study that says broccoli is like the worst thing that we can eat, instead of just believing that, like some people might do, and I'm not saying that you as a viewer are going to believe that, but there are some people who would see that and believe that and be like, oh, I thought broccoli was healthy for me, I'm just not going to eat it now. Like, that's completely contradicting so much. And while we are consistently learning more about nutrition and science, we want the information to be evolving, to be growing, to be learning more about things. Typically, it's not going to completely like switch everything. Now, while we are talking about some reliable sources or the lack of reliable sources, remember there are professionals out here who, like, this is what they do. If you're in doubt about nutrition information, I am very biased out here, but who better than to turn to than a registered dietitian? Registered dietitians have dedicated years to studying nutrition and also the application of it, doing supervised practice, to not just understanding the intricacies philosophies of nutrition, but basing that off of solid evidence-based knowledge, not just a personal opinion or a trend. Now, we often hear about misinformation or misleading claims from like nutrition gurus, nutrition influencers, but they can sometimes come from other professionals practicing outside the scope of practice. Okay, so now moving into this part of the video, a viewer of mine had sent me some information about a nutrition influencer that was spreading some concerning information. Let's watch.
This is why I don't eat citric acid. Approximately 99% of the world's citric acid is made with black mold. That's right, the citric acid in your food that you eat is produced by black mold. Aspergillus niger, aka black mold. It's considered safe by the FDA. So if you think you're eating clean but having inflammatory issues, this may be the cause.
This is straight up fear-mongering. The citric acid that is found in citrus fruits is molecularly, it's the same molecule. They're both the same molecule. When you are consuming the molecule citric acid, that doesn't change. There isn't additional black mold that is in the product as well. Citric acid, the molecule itself, can be harmful in large amounts. The acidic nature of it, that's not because of the source of it. But the amounts that are typically found in food products aren't a concern for safety when you're talking about the acid, the acidic nature of it. So while it is sourced from the fungus that is a type of black mold, the black mold is not in the actual product. Citric acid was originally isolated from citrus fruits, but it was just not like cost effective, and it was a lot more expensive. And so this was a way to reduce the cost, reduce food waste. Process is controlled and the outcome is purified. It is that molecule that does not have the black mold coming alongside with it. And it's worth noting that many products that a lot of people are consuming on a regular basis are also produced through fermentation. Things like bread, kimchi, sauerkraut, yogurt, cheese, wine, spirits, beer, miso, soy sauce, vinegars. And so this example specifically uses that fear mongering alongside of nutrition misinformation by taking some parts and running with it and creating these kind of outcomes that are not really telling the whole story. Now, this nutrition influencer's Instagram, like this is all of the red flags, all of the things that I was talking about in this video, like it checks the box. And this video specifically wasn't about her content in particular, but unfortunately a lot of nutrition influencers, they fit this. This video fits a lot of accounts. So I just really encourage you, when you find information that sounds a little bit scary or you're unsure, seek out. If you try to like find more information, sometimes there'll be already like videos or information out there debunking it. If you do have any questions, I will try to respond to those. My information is linked in the description box down below, but also put my email up here, kat@katbensonrdn.com. If you have a specific question, you're like, I really need this debunked, or is this true or not? I can't promise that I will answer, but I will do my best to try to find the evidence-based information out there to respond. All right, so that wraps it up for this video on the world of nutrition, misinformation, and information overload. There's so many great things about having a lot of information, but there's also a lot of downsides, specifically when it's misinformation. There's an overwhelming amount of nutrition claims, and so I want to also make it clear that I never fault the people who are just consuming this information to get it wrong. That is totally understandable. I am more concerned. I get frustrated at the people who are promoting it, who are making these kind of videos, and for whatever reason they're doing it for working with specific brands or just trying to create like this viral video, increase their followers. Just remember that evidence-based nutrition is often not flashy, and that true wellness is not found in a quick fix. Stay vigilant against misinformation, and remember, you can strive for health without subscribing to diet culture. I'll see you later. Bye.